Welcome to Future Dreamers, everybody. I am Kathryn Loeffler. I'm your host and cosmic hype witch and astrologer extraordinaire. I'm also the founder of Starlie, the most beautiful astrological portal on the internet. I created this as an investment in my own magic that I knew that I could democratize to give access to anybody who wants to know more about their astrology so that they can actually live out their full story in living color in this lifetime. You can get Starlie on your phone, on the web, anytime you want. It has the most rich and detailed and hyper-personalized astrological features you could ever dream of. I built it exactly for what I wanted as someone who loves astrology but wants to take it to a deeper level of personal activation. I believe that we all have a divine right to access our highest level of individuation in this lifetime and become absolutely unbounded creators. So if you are looking for a platform that allows you to do that, look no further than Starlight. Hello and welcome back to Future Dreamers. I'm so excited to have Emiscah Rose Barker as our guest today. She is a somatic mentor who helps people who are suffering from anxiety and trauma. And I have a bunch of questions to walk through with her that I'm so excited to hear for myself. And I know this is going to be a really helpful healing episode. So before we get into it deeper, Emiscah, thank you for joining. Can you tell us who you are, how you serve, and where you are? Because you are all the way across the world, and so excited to have you.
Yes, Kathryn, thank you so much for having me. I'm so delighted to be on your podcast. Who I am. Thank you for the beautiful introduction, first of all. I am a mentor and a healer, and I run a service-based healing business. So I help people really through the work of somatics and in child work and reparenting and really just a reconnection to the wisdom of the body, find their path through self-healing, really, from trauma and anxiety, which is usually what's sitting on top of trauma. And that's kind of a good overall of what I do. And next to my deeper one-to-one work, I also run really beautiful dance events, barefoot dancing, where we just get together and actually have fun and experience the joy that blooms out of healing trauma. So yeah, there's a little bit of everything under the umbrella of my business that's really just geared towards getting back into the body, tuning into the wisdom of the body, feeling our emotions, tuning in and loving that inner child. And it all kind of leads us to the same place, which is back to our true self and back to our joy. And I am currently in Sydney, Australia.
It's amazing. And I'm sure you'll tell us how you got there as we go into my next question, which is, powerful healers often find themselves in a place where they can lead and catalyze other people through healing because they had to walk that road on their own. They had to navigate the journeys of their own healing, and it can get wild and crazy. But really, that's where the gold comes, from the shadows and excavating our wounds and figuring out how we deal with them. So if you wouldn't mind, please open the veil of your own healing journey, the path you walk to get where you are, where you can actually lead people through your program, Bloom Beyond Anxiety.
Yes, thank you for this. So, as with most human beings, our stories are big and they're layered, and there's a lot that has led me here. And there have been a lot of underworlds that I have trekked. And so I guess where I'll go back to is I will actually go back to when I got engaged to the man who is now my husband of, well, gosh, we've been together for 11 years now, married, I think, for 7. When I got engaged...
Congratulations.
Thank you. A healthy marriage too, which is a really beautiful thing that I am just so grateful to have co-created with him. So if I trace back to, and really there was a lot going on within my engagement. I was really new to Australia at the time. I was born in New Hampshire in the States, but raised in Hawaii. I came to Sydney at 23 as an au pair, so as a nanny for a family here. And I ended up meeting my future husband. And, it's a big deal to move to a different country, right? And there's so much with that experience, so much just... It's really, for me, it felt like my whole life kind of got stripped away, and I was able to rediscover who I really was because I was in this whole new environment. And so, but going through all of that, once we got engaged, I began experiencing something called relationship anxiety. And so I started to have a lot of intrusive thoughts and worries, like a lot of questions about him and concerns, like, is he the one? There were all these big questions coming up in my mind. It was a lot of mental activity and worry. However, when I dropped into my body, the truth was that, and like in my heart, I had never felt so safe with another human. I felt very safe from a body perspective. But the anxiety was another level from going on in my mind. And then through the engagement, both of our fathers around the same time experienced health emergencies. His father was diagnosed with a terminal illness. My father had a health emergency back in Hawaii. And all this stuff just started to crumble after we got engaged. And as all of this started to crumble, and then death occurred, so my husband's father died shortly after, about a year later, I then moved into health anxiety and death anxiety, and got really scared that I was now going to be diagnosed with cancer. I was now going to die. Every body symptom and sensation meant there was something really wrong with me, and I was sick, or I would die. And this was the point where it became very physical, and to the point even where I would experience flu-like symptoms. I would experience random aches and pains. So I really thought something was wrong with my body. And through all of that, I then, and I got checked out by doctors and everything was fine. I didn't believe them, but they said everything was fine. And through that eventually brought me really into what the truth was for me. And what it was is I had had a lot of grief stored in my body, unresolved and unfelt grief stored in my body. One, from my parents' divorce when I was 5. So me being on the precipice of getting married, I then discovered that anxiety was like an alarm saying, oh, there's a lot of fear and a lot of grief from the break of a marriage when I was a child, and really being worried that that might happen to me too. And how do I know I'm safe? How do I know that won't happen with this man? And next to that, a lot of grief from the loss of my soon-to-be father-in-law. And I have had, as we all have, a lot of varying traumas. I've had a rocky relationship with my father. I've experienced loss in a sense, being from a family of divorce. There's a big break in the family and lots happens there, and you're no longer a family unit. So there's a big separation from my father, and then having my soon-to-be new father-in-law die, that really also brought up some old grief again from that kind of original loss, even though my father was still alive. And so what I ended up discovering through all of that, as my journey continued to move, what I really discovered was any symptoms of anxiety I was having was really an alarm going off, alerting me to stuff inside, in my inner world and in my body, that had not been tended to, that had not been felt, that was being held inside of my nervous system, inside of my psyche. And so trying to condense that as much as possible, that's really the journey that brought me to the work I now do now and the work I now offer others.
I'm popping in to give you a tiny commercial about what Starlight can do for you if you are someone who wants to lead a magical life. First of all, you deserve to understand your birth chart because it is a map of your psyche. Starlight offers the deepest dive free personal birth chart on the internet anywhere, and you can go to starlight.com and be reading it in the next 30 seconds. Super cool. Secondly, you are always in the middle of some kind of cosmic season, whether that's a season of initiation or a season of blessings and grace. You deserve to have that data. And Starlight has the deepest personalized portal for understanding what's called your personal natal transits. So you can dive in, scroll to the bottom of that page and see what your very long transits are. Those are the juicy ones. You can find out what's going on with your mood by looking at your moon transits, where you need to be taking action in your Mars transits, where you want to be bringing responsibility to your life and your Saturn transits. It's all there for you. So check out Starlight and deepen your magic from the touch of your phone. Toodles. Love that story because, so many people may have different manifestations of this going on for them from different stories in their past. But as a society, largely, we are not taught to listen to our bodies and connect our emotions with our bodies and understand that triggers aren't happening because of a negative reason other than they want to be listened to.
Yes.
A flashlight into something that can be resolved if we bring it to consciousness, bring light to the darkness.
Yes.
And so huge, I mean, the courage it must have taken you to walk this road, is like just much respect for walking that path and bringing clarity to it. To touch on your astrology, when we were speaking before we pressed record, it was just kind of astounding to see how much your journey makes sense. But you have so much in your 12th house of the body's unconscious, the mind's unconscious, and you have so much Capricorn going on there. You have Uranus, you have Neptune, you have Saturn. So it's like your Saturn is calling you to understand your structure from the interior outward. And then it all relates back to your Cancer in the 6th house, which is where you do that restructuring, where in order to thrive in relationship, you truly have to come home to yourself, and yours is in Cancer, which is the sign of coming home in your body, knowing who you are. And your Chiron is there. So you had the soul calling in this life to be your own wounded healer of what is it to be safe in your body. And then it all points up to your house of career. So by submerging into your own depths, and then healing your own wounds and bringing structure to the process of doing this and normalizing, like you having Uranus in your 12th house means like you are revolutionizing subterranean healing and then bringing structure to it, and your Mercury is there, so you have the ability to communicate it and turn it into a business that I think as people figure out how to thrive in this new world that challenges us from so many angles, from our own traumas to seeing trauma happen in the world, work like this is so important. So my next question is, you're bringing a new kind of healing that I'm sure this healing has been around for since ancient times, but in the current scheme of society, feeling our body we're not guided towards how that works. We're not given the tools. So I'm guessing that you had to figure out a lot of this on your own. And so as somatic work comes into the foray, it's still a new concept for a lot of people. Can you describe what somatic work is as a concept? How using somatic work to tackle anxiety and trauma can differ from talk therapy or traditional methods that people would use to manage anxiety, and just give us a little more, open the veil of what somatic work is and how you use it for these modalities.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for such a beautiful question, because it's a word that's kind of getting thrown around a lot now, and many people can interpret it in many different ways. And what you said at the beginning there is this is ancient, this is indigenous, this is body wisdom. This is something we're born with. We are born with this wisdom. When we're babies, when we're children, we are very in touch with our body, right? And then it gets quite conditioned out of us, we unfortunately within most cultures. And so what I want to say on somatics is, first of all, I do have a background as a yoga teacher in multiple yoga lineages. So I was really lucky to find yoga very young, which really did help me come back into my body, because through my healing journey, I began to realize that I lived most of my life quite dissociated, quite checked out of my body, because it was just too much to be in my highly sensitive body. And so yoga really brought me back in early on. So I really credit the practice to bring me back to my body, back to my breath, back to just what it's like to be still or move consciously with the body. And then next to that, really, because there's so many practices, right, that fall under the umbrella of somatics, like Qigong and Tai Chi and all kinds of beautiful dance and dance therapy, all of these things, right? So what I really like to actually bring it all the way back to the truth of what somatic actually means to me is it really just means attuning to the wisdom of the body. And listening to the wisdom and noticing and becoming aware of the body's symptoms and the body's sensations, and looking at these experiences as like they're messages, right? It's some kind of communication that's coming through the body, that's wanting to be heard, wanting to be expressed, wanting to be acknowledged. And I just find that really simplifies the term. And it's really, when you come to the root of it, it's indigenous, it's body wisdom, it's stuff that it's what we're born with, you know?
Yeah, I love that. And I think that's so important to bring up, because in the cultures we are so often raised in, especially in the West, we're so conditioned to live in a mental world, to work past our body's capacity, like value, measuring our value through external things, through what our body could be telling us. And we're not taught, the subtle ways our body may communicate, the subtle senses. And
Yes.
so it sounds like this is heavily into what you do, and opening up the permission slip to say, if you're not listening, if you're not in communication with your body, you might just be letting a lot of things go, like past your head without dealing with them. And that might stack up the trauma and stack up the anxiety that you may be experiencing. So my next question is, if you can share just a few techniques that a listener who may not be deep into this work but is curious, their curiosity has been piqued, some tips on how to start listening to your body so that you can get into the path of managing your anxiety.
Yes, so there's so many. And like I spoke to you before, slow, gentle yoga with the breath, with attention on the breath, is such an effective, easy way to begin the process of just slowing down and starting to become more attuned to what's going on in the body and what happens when you breathe that way, and notice how your body expands and contracts with the breath, right? That's a really, really key, beautiful, gentle practice. Next to that, honestly, long walks, and we're going to get simple here because this is right, it's coming back to nature, right? It's coming back
Simple is the best. Simple is the best.
Yeah, it's coming back to ancient wisdom. And what did we do? Like, long walks in nature, especially barefoot, can be such an incredible remedy to help manage, to help settle it down. There's something called heel drops, where you can raise up on your toes and drop your heels down to the ground or the earth, and just really allow the body to feel that weight, feel that weight dropping you down and grounding the body, helping it to feel a little bit more grounded and connected to the earth. Something else that I just have to tell everyone, and I usually tell everyone, a very effective practice is splashing your face with ice cold water every morning upon waking. And what this does is it actually tones the vagus nerve, which is inside of it's the largest nerve we have, right? It's part of and connected to the nervous system. It's connected to everything in the body. So splash the face with cold water. And this also activates something we have called the mammalian diving reflex. And this can I know, it's wild. It's something that divers know about, to be able to dive underwater. So it can stimulate this reflex, which can immediately slow down the heart rate and slow down the breathing. So if you think of anxiety, and if someone's having a lot of somatic or physical symptoms, the heart might be racing, the breathing might be kind of fast, it really helps to just slow all of that down without you having to have much conscious awareness around trying to get it down, but just allowing that cold water on the face can really help to settle things. And honestly, writing in a journal, writing pages in a journal, can really help to manage and soothe things. And singing. We've forgotten to sing and use the voice. Again, the singing tones the vagus nerve, and even humming. Any of these things just help to... These are indigenous practices that we, indigenous sang all day. They sang every day. They danced every day. They walked in nature every day. They were in water every day. So it's these few practices that I love to share.
None of those are crazy complicated. They make too much sense, and so it makes a lot of sense that because most people don't get to do any of that. I mean, I sing to my cats all day, I'm glad no one's hearing it. I've made up a whole album of like crazy cat songs, but it is just so natural and normal. And I don't sing in front of any other people, but
Hmm.
thank you so much for sharing those things. It just goes to show that like healing doesn't have to be as complicated, or you don't need some wild newfangled tech. Like our bodies, I think sometimes we forget that our bodies are these absolutely fascinating magical technologies and we take them for granted. And we look to the external world to figure out where value, how value is defined, but our own bodies can like share so much of that wisdom that's just absolutely ancient.
So
So,
much wisdom. And that's the
yeah.
thing, when we do just create the space to drop in, it's like the body actually knows what to do. It really does. It has this innate capacity for healing. It really does. And so it's really about finding space to start to slow down. And it's hard. It's hard for people to slow down and start to listen. And there's a lot of lack of, usually there's a lack of safety to be able to slow down, right? The nervous system doesn't feel safe to slow down. So it's understandable. But once we start to build that capacity and that safety and start to really listen, that's just, yeah, that's where the gold is.
Yeah, that's
Mm.
amazing advice. And
Yeah.
as we speak to that, in the modern world, it's so common to hear or conceive of anxiety as something that's really just mental in the head. Oh, you're just having anxious thoughts, or
Mm.
oh, you're just having anxious emotions. You're being too emotional. And so I love how your kind of framework of somatic mentoring and work around somatics helps us change the perspective that there's a tendency to almost criticize ourselves if we're too in our head, or like just shut those thoughts off. But bringing the perspective back to actually that your body is keeping the score, and if you listen to it and reconnect your
Mm.
connection to your body, you may open up an entirely new realm of healing for yourself. So can you talk about the role of the body in addressing, whether it's physical pain or just connecting to the body to understand more about how to unravel your traumas for resolution?
Yes, a great question. And this is something this can be a very big, complex topic as well. So to try to simplify it, there's a theory developed called polyvagal theory, which was developed by a man named Stephen Porges. Don't know if you've heard of that, but it's
No.
basically the theory states that the nervous system moves through varying stages all throughout the day. So to try to simplify, if we look at it from three stages, there's the safety. There's the space inside of our nervous system where we feel safe. So this is when we feel like we're really settled, like we can feel calm in connection, where we feel grounded and open and curious and mindful. And that's kind of a safety ventral vagal state. And then I like to call that state the green zone, like everything's nice and green and soft there. And then you move up to what would be looked at as the hyperarousal or the danger state and the sympathetic response of the nervous system. And this is where you might have heard the term fight or flight. So this is where this is a sign that the sympathetic branch of the nervous system has switched on, and this is usually where you see panic, anxiety, worry, fear, anger, irritation, frustration. This is a sign that there's an alert going on in the system, in the body. That's then you might notice mental symptoms, worries, a lot of mental emotional activity, but actually the sympathetic response is active in the body. Looking at those two, I mean, to kind of speak and to finish that off, but that really speaks to that anxiety portion, the fight or flight, right? But then moving all the way up, which you can go into a freeze response, and that's like the life threat. That's where you might find people dissociating, numb, depression, shame, shut down, really like a feeling of feeling trapped. And so just to simplify, we could kind of, and then you can have a mix of the hyper arousal and hypo arousal. So you're kind of fight or flight and freeze. And then there's fawn as well, which I won't go into, but there's so much within
Sure.
this theory. And so this really, it's the way this encompasses the body and what the body's actually moving through when someone is experiencing anxiety. It's moving, the nervous system is experiencing a certain state, and that state in the nervous system needs to be addressed. in my opinion, through somatic work and through attuning to the body and finding out, where is that alarm coming from? What's the alert? What's going on? Why is your body feeling unsafe? What is being triggered or activated that's reminding the body of an old threat? So that's really, to kind of bring my work into it. That's where I go with my clients, is like, if the body's coming up with that kind of response or reaction or activity, it's usually because it's pointing towards an old wound or an old experience that is similar to something they're currently moving through.
So fascinating. It really is that the body keeps the score, and that there's an entire life cycle of physical responses that then percolate up to the mental. And so when you can point someone or lead them through an inquiry of this now mentally manifested anxiety and trauma, but you find out that it really has its roots in something from your past that you may have numbed or like even maybe forgotten about, when you are able to go back to that place, and obviously this is like, you would do a lot of work to actually do the resolution, but by expressing that, lead us through just a little bit of like how you would go about taking something that is an old trauma and releasing it, or how does that transformation then allow you to lessen your anxiety? Obviously, keeping the body's wisdom wrapped up in all of that.
Yeah, beautiful question. So really the way I work with that, and what I find to be like so resolving, is, first of all, it's bringing the body into a sense of safety as much as possible. And sometimes this is really hard when there's a lot of trauma and there's a lot going on in the person's life. But finding that place where there's just enough safety in the body. And this usually, this is what the beauty of one-to-one work does. And someone who is very embodied and can hold that space, to then really just gently inquire into, noticing, what are these sensations that are arising? What do they feel like? And are they familiar? And it's so often that these sensations, which are usually under the thoughts. So the thoughts are kind of just like the top of the tip of the iceberg. And when you drop into the body, there's a lot of stuff going on that, like, when you drop into the body, you maybe your mind was so active thinking, okay, it's protecting, because it has a beautiful job to protect and keep you safe and think your way through things and all the things, right? But when you can come into a space, again, that's bringing the safety to the body, to ground down into the body, be brought down, and really get curious about what's going on there. And when getting curious about what's going on there, when you identify something that's familiar, how I then work is with my clients and with myself, what I've led myself through, and this is off the back of various incredible modalities I have also explored and learned from, is really tuning into, okay, I've come to discover it as like, who's in there? How old am I? Like, how old am I when I first felt this way? And is there an experience attached to that age? Is there an event or something that happened, whether it's a big trauma or a little trauma, like something that happened inside of my body that felt traumatic? And it's that little person and that experience that often, I say it might be simple. It's usually not simple, but it's that simply needs to speak and express words that never got a chance to be spoken, or to feel the emotion that never got to be felt. And when that's held in a safe space and witnessed by another who really knows how to attune to you and support you in that, that's where there's just incredible medicine in terms of resolving those original wounds.
Popping in one last time to tell you about my favorite feature in Starlight. You can go to starlight.com and go to the Journals tab. And inside of that portal, you can access astral journaling. Astral journaling is one of my favorite things to do that allows me to constantly keep track of not only what's going on in my own life, but how the events of my daily life are playing out in relation to the cosmic seasons I'm engaged in right now through the lens of my personal natal transits. So when you go into the journals tab and you journal about whatever is going on in your life, and you can type it on your computer, you can type it on your phone, or if you're on the go, just pop open the keyboard of your phone to the speech to text button and just talk your journal into your phone. When you click save, Starlight will generate 10 to 12 paragraphs of astral journal feedback that compare what's going on in your life right now to what personal natal transits are going on for you, and make those correlations of your real life to this energetic seasons that the stars are mirroring back to you. And it will weave in your birth chart to tell you what allies in your chart, what archetypes in your chart and in your psyche can help you deal with, meet any of the seasons you're going through with the most consciousness, to make sure that you are enacting the highest level of your hero story in this lifetime. So check it out, starlight.com. Toodles. Love that. Yeah, it's almost like going back to a younger version of yourself and saying, you made it through that, but I, as the adult who survived, thanks to you, can now keep you safe. And I'm sure that's just a very simplified version of what happens in these deep unraveling of these processes, but that can lead you back into now feeling like that safety can be consistent. Like once safety can be something that you can trust, you have a lot more space to do more healing and repattern, I suppose.
Absolutely. And that, as you're speaking to, that is very much the work. People might have heard of the work and term of reparenting. This is the reparenting process. You come back in and you reparent those little ones inside of you that still feel wounded or lost or hurt and need something they didn't get back when the original wound occurred.
Man, being human is wild.
Wild ride. It's a wild ride.
It is such a wild. I mean, I'm sure it always has been, but just kudos to everyone who's just like making sense of making it make sense. And it's the beauty of the new, as the world gets crazier when we view what's going on in the external, I think, like the corresponding perfect wave that's meeting it is that everyone can come in. So many people are coming into their gifts, which is so evident through how you're really living the highest potentiality of your hero's story that's shown throughout your birth chart. And I won't go all into it, but like when I looked at it, I was just like, she chose to activate the highest levels of the gift through traveling the journey of the story that can include deep traumas. But what we have to excavate in there can lead to just beautiful, on the other side, not only gifts in terms of abundance, that this is now a business that you get so much gratification in leading others through their healing, but just that that you made it, you surfed some big waves.
Thank you for that reflection.
Yeah.
They were really big, and it was really hell for a long time. So I appreciate that.
I feel that, and just like when you see someone who like got through that, it's just to witness someone else and be like, I don't know the details of your story, I don't know what it was like, in the nights or the days when you had to just hold yourself through the experience of like, how the fuck is this gonna end, like when is this not gonna feel this way? That can feel like eternity for people, and
it can
just to deal
it can.
And for people who are dealing with chronic anxiety.
Yeah, and I don't mean, I laughed a bit there. I laugh at my own story because it was such a wild ride. When I look back now, I laugh because I'm like, how did I make it through that without medication, without wine, without self-soothing, without these soothing coping mechanisms that so many humans, and no judgment, so many humans fall into because it's so intense, So but the one that's struggling and suffering inside of a life of debilitating chronic anxiety, you're holding on, your every day is just, how do I survive? Like, how do I survive this day? So it's really important to speak to that. Also because I don't think, the world, like while mental health has been destigmatized mostly, like it's much more common to go to therapy, there's still a lot of work to be done, and there's still a lot of people out there really suffering and really afraid to get help, don't know how to get help. really in some dark. They're really in the dark. And I really always hope that my story shows or gives a sense of hope to others who are really struggling.
Absolutely. And I think that, as we talk, as you mentioned, there just are so many people throughout the world. And in the West, yes, mental health has been talked about for the last few decades, but there's still plenty of parts of the world and parts of the West where it's just like people either don't have the time, the money, the access to resources, the safety and space in their life to embark upon healing. And so what I love about the work you're bringing to the world is that everyone can connect to their body. And so my last question is around, for people who are suffering from chronic anxiety, who have been disconnected from their body for maybe a very long period of time, can you suggest a practice that will just lead you back into a relationship with your body, or how to become aware of your body? And I know that your work has so much compassion around it as well. So anything about that would be great to kind of close up with.
Yeah, so actually what comes to mind with this question is another really simple remedy. Again, that's the thing, is I love simple, because life is so full and there's so many things, and so often we need to actually take things off and pull things back versus add something that's too much. And so someone who identifies with what you just described, I would actually, like, one of my most favorite simple practices is for body awareness is actually finding your most favorite type of body oil that like smells really good and you really love and is really soft, and really mindfully rubbing your whole body with that oil every night if you can, or at least 5 days a week, of just really giving yourself a nice oil rub and massage. Nothing too crazy. Take 5 minutes. And I just feel like this really allows one to drop into that awareness. Okay, yeah, I'm this is my calf, and this is my thigh, and this is my stomach, and really come into that awareness of the body. And I just find that this opens the door naturally for self-love and self-compassion, because you're just coming back into connection with yourself. And it's that real, it makes me think of that, like a mother's touch, right? A mother's soothing touch. And when you think of a mother, a healthy mother, an attuned mother, you might think of compassion and love and attention. And so it's that beautiful practice. That's what I would recommend.
Love that. It's so simple, and something that you might not think to do in a world where we all maybe feel a lot of force to rush and to not even just to find, like what you're describing is a 5-minute practice, and everyone probably has lotion or something, and we all take showers. So to take that 5 minutes and say, body, thank you for getting me through this day, every other day that you've gotten me through. And I absolutely want to give you the time to hear what you've got to say, and to develop that as a practice to to really deepen that well of self-love, because that can power so much other healing. So thank you so much for sharing all of that wisdom. And is there anything you'd like to just share that we didn't touch on that would be a good closing thought before we get into kind of like, where can we find you? How can people find you to work with you? I'd love to just open that up to you.
Yeah, thank you. And this has just been so beautiful. And I'm so grateful for the opportunity to share this and have this platform to do it on. And I think what I wanted to touch on is, and I might have skipped this, you might have mentioned this before, but how the somatic work is different from traditional talk therapy and traditional therapies we might see people doing for anxiety. And it's different because most traditional therapies are just isolating the mind, right, or the brain. And there's a lot of, cognitive behavioral therapy, talk therapy, these different things. The truth is, we can only process up in the mind so much until it just doesn't go anymore. And you start to become exhausted from the talk therapy and the processing in the mind over and over, and telling the same story over and over. And what the somatic work does is it allows the body to process the story. Instead of just the mind processing, it allows the body to process it. And that's really where I see it as the difference in terms of what most people are engaged with. Any way anyone can get into the body, however that feels good for them, whether it's yoga, whether it's intuitive movement, whether it's dance, swimming, climbing a tree, walking, making sandcastles in the sand, whatever it is where you can be in your body and be active in your body. There's just such medicine there. So that's what I
think that's so deep. That's such deep wisdom. And for the world we live in today, that's such a good example of how you can do that as an individual person. And maybe as like wisdom to our society, we need to get in connection to the body of our earth, like, as above, so below.
Absolutely. And that, it's such a good point you made. The more we come into connection with ourselves and back into the body, the greater we come into connection with the earth. It's just, it's what naturally happens. And then there's more natural incline to care for the earth and take care of this beautiful planet we get to live on and feed ourselves good food and all these things that we know are beneficial to all beings, Come back into connection with self, leads you back into connection with the earth, and so much more. There's so much more of that.
Absolutely. And and it kind of like the thread of what you're saying is that your body has so much wisdom that we have, that indigenous cultures and our ancestors 10,000 years ago were probably so practiced, and it was innate for them to listen to that.
Yes.
And if we can just now, but in our modern world, or the last 5,000 years where it was all about the linear mental world, and just all it is a reconnection, it's not that we need to go one or the other, it's just a reconnection. And so from a societal, global meta perspective, it's like we don't need to get rid of technology. We just need to connect it to the earth, and the earth will give us the wisdom that we need to make all of this come back into balance.
Yes, and just, to back off that final thing is like, we are nature, right? And something else that something that really supported me through my journey is realizing how similar we are. Like, we are nature, and the weather, and if you watch the weather move from raining, cloudy, sunny, storms, like, we go through all of that emotionally as well. We get sad, we cry, we get angry, we're happy, we're joyful. This is natural. It's like so many people are afraid to feel all these emotions, but the emotions are just nature in expression out of the human body, and it helps to kind of remember at times that like we are nature, and if we follow and pay attention as well to nature, the more we can pay attention to what the body naturally needs to do in order to heal and come back to homeostasis, really.
Well said. So well said, Emiscah. Thank you for everything you've shared. I know I'm going to go back and listen to this and start modeling some of the practices and trying out the practices that you've shared with us. And so I've been following your Instagram and learning more about your Bloom Beyond Anxiety program. So if you could share with us just a little bit about what programs you have available now, how people can find you to work with you, your socials, which I'll drop all of this in the show notes, but anything you'd like to share about how people can find you.
Yes, so my main work is one-to-one. It's a 1-to-1 3-month mentorship healing program, which is called Bloom Beyond Anxiety, where I really work with high-functioning, high-achieving women who are struggling anxiety and really pushing along, but really deeply struggling, and helping them. What I really like to say is through that work, utilizing the 3 pillars, even though there's so much that goes on inside of this healing container, is really bringing them back into reconnection with their body and the wisdom of their body, learning how to regulate their nervous system, to soothe their nervous system, what practices they need to hold themselves through their lives, and helps their nervous system settle down from the dysregulation it's likely experiencing. And then what's ever so potent is the inner child healing and reparenting work that I actively do with them. And that's all inside of Bloom Beyond Anxiety. And next to that, I'm expanding my work right now into really working specifically with entrepreneurs and healers and mentors and artists and creatives and teachers who are the leaders, who are out there, who are really doing the things, but they're still finding maybe they're not able to fully expand and fully able to bloom into their true selves, or their true self within their business and their work. I'm expanding into welcoming in that as well. So that's on the way, and I'm very excited about that. And all of this work is done online through Zoom. And then I also, being that I'm in Sydney, Australia, I do run dance and movement events. I actually run something called Barefoot Babes Dance Night, where we kick off our shoes, we dance barefoot just the way the Indigenous would, and I actually play, fun millennials, kind of R&B, pop, and hip hop from the 90s and early 2000s, because it's just fun, and I think my inner child just loves to dance and just let loose and eat cupcakes and tap into that joy that is so beautifully felt after living in the underworlds of pain and dark and grief for so long. And then I do other intuitive dance and movement things as well. So that encompasses most of my work at this point, and people can find me at my website, which is emiscahrose.com, and I'm quite active on Instagram, which is, my handle is at Emiscah Rose as well.
Amazing. Well, thank you for sharing that. As you were mentioning 90s R&B songs just started playing in my head. What a beautiful, I always kind of laugh that when our generation gets really old, we're going to have the dopest old folks homes, like the music is just going to be like, back that ass up is just going to be, and I'm sure we'll have really cool lighting.
Imagine.
Something to look forward to.
It's hilarious.
Vanilla Ice. Yeah. It's going to be a rich experience.
It really is.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much for everything you've shared. You've given me at least like 5 things I'm going to go back and be like, I need to start. Why have I not made time for these simple, beautiful practices that allow you to connect with one of the wisest thing about you, which is your body? So thank you so much, Emiscah. It was a pleasure.
You're so welcome. It was my pleasure, and thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yay. Well, can't wait for this episode to come out. So if you got to this point, you got so much richness in this episode, and thank you for joining us on Future Dreamers. Until next time, ciao.